Hi, and welcome to Explore Classroom. My name is Jennifer Bergen, and I am so happy to have you join us today. It's the first day of a new month, and what better way to kick it off than alongside a National Geographic Explorer? At National Geographic, we believe in the power of exploration, wonder, and storytelling to change the world. And this Explorer Classroom YouTube show connects students from all over the world with our National Geographic explorers for short lessons and times for your questions. Today at Explorer Classroom, we have the explorer named Shivan Parusnath. Shivan is a herpetologist, geneticist, zoologist, biologist. You might have guessed it, he really loves science. And he has a PhD from the University of Witwatersrand in South Africa, where he's been researching Sungazers, which, by the way, the Latin name for this lizard is, for you Lord of the Rings fans, Smaug giganteus. Sungazers are a threatened lizard species, and Siobhan has been studying this rare and charismatic lizard since 2011. And what he's learned and told others about sungazers has led to really important changes that create safe habitats for sungazers to live and grow in numbers. This work has also led him to research the illegal reptile trade in South Africa and how it affects the populations of the lizards. Siobhan's also a photographer, filmmaker, and an artist. His goal is to use his passions for reptiles, science, and art to share news and videos with other reptiles, helping more people better understand and stop illegal animal trading in South Africa. So before we get into today's lessons, we welcome all the friends who are joining us from all over the world. So wherever you may be, give us a cheer when you hear your state, country, school, or class. We welcome our friends in Virginia, New York, Tennessee, Washington State, Texas, Colorado, Georgia, Nevada, Wisconsin, California, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, New Mexico, Canada, Dominican Republic, Germany, United Kingdom. Also, Mrs. Mangali Soto's firsties in Toronto. Hey, pals. Parkway Elementary School in Wisconsin. Hello. The Poudre School District Virtual in Colorado. The Bygos family in Washington State. And Maya and Alexander at HB Homeschool in the Dominican Republic. We are so glad you're joining us today. And with that, let's get this Explorer Classroom started. It's time to turn it over to Siobhan to share about reptiles. Take it away, Siobhan.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you today. I'm going to show you a presentation, so I'm just going to share my screen. And can everybody see my screen? Yes? Great. Okay, well, let me start by asking you a question. Who of you likes dinosaurs? Quite a few people. Well, let me say that when I was a little kid, I loved dinosaurs. Okay, so here's little me sitting on the back of a statue of an Allosaurus. And I was very lucky as a child because my parents realized very early on that I loved dinosaurs. And so they took me to a park in South Africa where there are these huge dinosaur statues, and you can kind of get a feel for how big these animals used to be. And you can kind of see that I was drawn to the animals that had a lot of spikes and a lot of spines on their bodies. And here I am with my dad, 3 years old. Well, my dad was not 3 years old. I was 3 years old, next to this Ankylosaurus. And I really just have to say, before I really start this talk, I just want to say that when I was a little kid, I didn't see, I used to love watching nature documentaries, and I didn't see a lot of people of color working with animals and being photographers and scientists. And, I really have to say thank you to my parents who really showed me all the things that you can do in life and that you can study nature and you can study scientists, even though I didn't really know that it was a possibility. So I'll come back to this point later, but I just wanted to start with that. So I think that 3-year-old Siobhan would be really excited to see the animal that I ended up studying as an adult. This beautiful, big, spiky lizard called the Sungazer. So how big do you think this animal is? Do you think it's the size of a ruler, about this big? Is it this big? Is it the size of a crocodile? It actually is a bit smaller than it looks, right? Because it looks like it's going to be giant. So that's the size of a Sungazer. And that's me wearing my same hat that I use to keep me safe when I'm out in the sun. And I'm going to come back to the Sungazer in just a moment. I wanted to start by just telling you a bit more about how I, as moving on from being a little kid and a teenager, how this love for animals grew and how I ended up studying the animals that I do. So when I was in my teenage years, I loved animals so much that when it was time for me to find a weekend job to make a little bit of extra cash, I got a job at the local pet shop in South Africa. And this was a wonderful way for me to connect to animals and get to know them. And because I loved reptiles so much, I ended up keeping some as pets. I had a few geckos as pets, and in the bottom right is a photograph of my bedroom when I was a teenager, filled with tanks, all sorts of weird animals living in there. But as I kind of spent more time with my animals, I realized, especially with animals like lizards, I felt like maybe I wasn't giving them exactly the life that they needed, because in captivity, you don't know exactly what the animal needs because they're not domesticated animals like dogs or cats. So I kind of felt like as I grew a bit older and I had the opportunity to go to university and study, I wanted to study biology and study reptiles in the wild, so I would be able to see how they live in the wild and not just in a cage. Okay. And funny enough, the very first lizard that I ended up studying was a gecko that actually does live in homes, in houses. It's called a tropical house gecko. On the left-hand side, you can see me with a fishing rod, which has a little hoop at the end. And I would actually catch these geckos. And on the right-hand side, you can see what one looks like. It's sitting on a yellow wall, and it actually is a bit yellow itself. And that's because I found that this gecko changes color. And you'll see at the bottom, I've got a name, Professor Corey Skuman. I've written that name there for two reasons. Firstly, because I was in his house catching those geckos. And secondly, because he was the lecturer at university who really was a great mentor to me. When I started studying biology at university, he really encouraged me to study reptiles. He knew that I love reptiles, and he told me, I should follow my passion. And that was a really big help to me along my way. And I just want to say that if you feel like there's something you're passionate about and you want to talk to someone, go seek out a mentor. Ask your parents to help you find someone who is in the field that can help you learn a bit more about how to become the thing you want to become, or how to learn more about the thing you want to learn more about. So in this first research project I did in 2010, I found that these geckos change color. So that same yellow gecko, you put him on a dark brown background and he turns dark brown. So that was really cool, learning that geckos actually change color much the way chameleons do. And I was kind of hooked, after studying reptiles in the wild, well, in a home, but still in the wild environment, I was really hooked, and I realized this is what I wanted to do with my life. So this is when I moved on to this beautiful lizard called the Sungazer. So I'm going to show you a bit about where they live. But I first wanted to bring up the question of, why is the Sungazer called the Sungazer? Because that's quite a unique name. Well, you can actually see that this lizard lives in a very flat kind of grassland without a lot of trees and rocks. And in order to raise themselves up to see predators and prey out in the wilderness, they actually they lift themselves up using their front arms. And the second thing is that when they get into this posture, their bodies actually work a lot like solar panels that you see on the roofs of houses that collect energy. Because they live in this flat area, getting into this position actually helps them gain extra warmth from the sun. And they live in these burrows that they dig themselves. As I said, there aren't a lot of rocks and trees, so they have to dig their own burrows and they live in them. These are two baby Sungazers just coming out for some morning sun. So let me tell you where I am and where the Sungazers are. Here's a world map. It's the same map that's right behind me. Can you see where South Africa is? Start off by looking for Africa. Okay, do you see Africa? Now look right at the bottom. Okay, that's where I am. Now that country, okay, I'm going to zoom into a map of South Africa. That is the map of the whole country. And that gray area that you see somewhere around the middle, top right, that is the whole area in the world where you can find Sungazer lizards. That's the only place you can find them. So if we go back to that map, you see that tiny red dot I've put in South Africa, right at the bottom of Africa. That's the only place in the world you can find Sungazers. So they're pretty rare and pretty special animals. Now, unfortunately, like many other places in the world, South Africa is a developing country, and that means that a lot of land is being transformed for our use, human use. Humans are building houses and mines for gold and diamonds and crops, to create the food that we eat. So unfortunately, we are losing a lot of habitat to sun gazers. And one of my big jobs has been to try and create safe habitats for sun gazers so that despite this habitat transformation, they still have safe places to live. Now, that's not the main thing I'm going to talk about today. I want to talk about another thing that is threatening wild sun gazers, and that is the illegal pet trade. Now, I told you a bit earlier that when I was a kid, I had pet lizards, and they were bred in captivity. Oops. They were bred in captivity, and they were, their eggs came from lizards that lived in captivity. And so they weren't being taken from the wild and affecting wild populations. Now, the interesting thing is that sun gazers, unlike many animals like dogs or cats, they don't breed when you take them out of the wild because they live in such a special habitat that all of the sun gazers we see in pet shops around the world are actually taken from the wild and are reducing the wild populations. And the sun gazer is now threatened with extinction because of this. And when I do research, those burrows that I showed you earlier where we had the two baby sun gazers coming out of, sometimes when I'm in the field looking for sun gazer burrows, I find these. And this is a burrow that's been dug up by humans. And the sun gazers inside have been stolen from the wild and sent overseas. And what some people do in South Africa, which is just wrong, is that they claim that they have bred the sun gazers themselves and that they are safe to send overseas because they weren't taken from the wild. And the difficult thing is, how do you know the difference between a wild sun gazer and one that has been bred in captivity? You can't really tell. So it's easy to fool the people that give out permits to send animals around the world. And the answer for me to this problem came through the use of what? What is this on the screen? I think you guys know. It's DNA, right? So we can actually use genetics and DNA to understand more and to solve this problem. So how it works is that every living thing on this planet has DNA inside of it. And that DNA works kind of like a barcode. So if you go to the shops and you pick up an item, it probably has a barcode on it, and you can use that to identify what that object is. It's the same way, in the same way, we took DNA from each of us and put it onto a computer. We could look at the individual barcodes each of us has and we'll know who is who, okay? So what I did was I collected little clippings of sun gazer scales. So I took a nail clip, and it's just like cutting your nails. I clipped off just a little bit of the end of a spike on the sun gazer tail that's on the screen. And then I extracted the DNA. And then we ended up looking at this barcode on a screen, on a computer. And this is what it actually looks like. So you can see that if we have 4 sun gazers, a mom, a dad, and 2 of their babies, each of them have very different barcodes. And even though they all have the same colors and the same codes, you see that they're all a little bit different. So using this, we can kind of do what's called a paternity test, where you can actually tell if you have a baby sun gazer, you can tell which adult it came from. So if you have a poacher trying to tell us that they bred this baby sun gazer in captivity, I can say, all right, let me take a DNA sample from all of your sun gazers and I'll tell you whether you actually bred them or not. And so we were able to use this very new, innovative genetic technology to prove that people weren't breeding sun gazers, they were stealing them. And since we started doing this, we've actually changed the laws in South Africa. And now if you want to export sun gazers from South Africa for pets, you have to do genetic testing. Okay, so that's the science part. And I kind of want to talk a little bit more about something else. When you are young and you think about what you want to do as a, what is your career? What do you want to spend your life doing? You often think about that. And you often think, well, maybe I want to be a doctor. Maybe I want to be an author. Maybe I want to be an artist. The truth is, you don't have to just be any one thing. You can be many different things. And while spending all these years studying reptiles, I discovered that photography is such a powerful tool to tell stories about animals that I realized that, I also want to be a photographer, so why not? So, these are some photographs that I used of sun gazers to kind of show people, tell them all about what sun gazers are and why they're special. And I actually also made a short film in 2018. It's a film called Saving Dragons, And you can actually go into YouTube and look up this film, and you can watch an 8-minute documentary that goes a little bit more into the science behind this problem. And you'll see some beautiful videos of sungazers. Now, I wanted to just show you a couple of photographs, and I hope there's nobody here that's scared of snakes, because there are going to be a couple of snake photographs. So I just wanted to talk to you a little bit about the power of using photographs to tell stories. So this is a snake called the plain mountain adder, and this was only the 7th individual of the snake that had ever been found by humans. And because it was such a rare snake, when I found this snake, I went on a trip to go looking for it. I had to take photographs to tell the story. And when we share these photographs all over Facebook and so on, people got very excited and wanted to know more. So we started to teach them about these snakes and why they were so rare. And here you can see the snake in its natural habitat. So when you see these photographs, you just kind of want to know more. You want to know where it lives and what it eats. And that's just a very exciting part of the story. You know, you see the picture and you just want to keep asking questions. This is another snake that is very common all across Africa. And this is a snake called the puff adder. It's a very dangerous snake. And you know, snakes have a bad reputation generally. People are very scared of them. But the truth is they are very beautiful and they're so interesting. And when you can show photographs like this to people and you can say, look how beautiful it is, you know, maybe you can change some people's minds and maybe help them overcome their fears and maybe help them appreciate these animals. Earlier, I was talking about how geckos can change their colors to the way chameleons do. And here is a little chameleon. And you can see that he's got the same colors on him that are in the background because he is able to change his colors too. Now, here's an interesting gecko. This gecko lives in the Namibian desert. Okay, so Namibia is a country just northwest of South Africa. And these lizards have amazing adaptations to live in the desert. This little guy is just licking his nose and his eyeballs to get the sand off of them so he can see and breathe properly. And what's amazing is if you zoom in, you can actually see that he's got a protective membrane over his eye that helps him keep his eyes safe from all of the sand that he experiences. And what is this weird hand? It looks like a hand from an alien. It's actually the same gecko that I showed you. They have these little spikes on their fingers that help them to not stick, not sink into the desert that they live in, because they live in these huge deserts filled with sand. Here's another interesting foot. And this gecko has adapted to have this huge wide pad, kind of like almost like a, what do you call those things? When you ski, what are those things called? Ski, I don't know. It prevents you from sinking in. So for me, this is one of the exciting things about macro photography, the kind of photography I do. You get to see all these details that you may normally miss in the world around you. These are scales of a snake called the egg eater. And the egg eater doesn't have fangs, but it rubs its scales together to make a very loud hissing sound that scares predators away. And what about this? These look like flower petals or something like that, but actually they belong to a baby sungazer. So it's just so amazing the details you can find in nature. Now I'm going a little bit over time here, I think. So let me just show you a couple of last photographs and then I'll end my presentation. I just have so many photographs to show you. I couldn't pick which ones I wanted. I wanted to tell you a quick story. This is when I was in Madagascar in 2019. Now, what you see in that photograph is a toilet. Now, that's not a particularly exciting thing to photograph, is it? Well, when I went to Madagascar, I went looking for a gecko that I'd loved since I was a little kid. It's called a Satanic leaf-tailed gecko. And funny enough, after a week of searching for it in the wild, I found one by the toilet. So it was very smelly, but it was so worthwhile. And look at this gecko, it's amazing. You'll see its head on the right-hand side, and it takes you a few seconds to figure out where is its head and where is its body, because it looks like it's part of a leaf. And that's part of its amazing adaptation. And here's a close-up of its face. And you'll see those little red marks behind its eye that look like light coming through a leaf. That just helps it hide from its predators. All right, and this is the last animal I want to show you. Well, where is the animal? You can't really see one. It kind of looks like just a twig. Well, if you look closer, maybe you'll see something now. There's actually a gecko on this little branch. And I'm going to show you a picture of what this gecko looks like when you take him off the branch, and you're going to be surprised, okay? You ready? Look at him. Look at the skin. He's adapted to look exactly like the tree trunk that he's sitting on. And look at those little tubercles. It looks like he's growing moss on him. All right, well, I've spoken enough. I've showed you a lot of photographs, and now it's time, I think, to get some questions from you. I've got my email address and my Instagram account here. If you want to take those down, you are really welcome to contact me at any time to talk to me more. If you want a video call, you want to ask me some questions. And I've got a picture of a rat there. And actually, let me show you something. Let me stop sharing my screen because there's someone very special I want to show you. This is my rat named Sassy. And she really loves me. And I think she's going to give me a kiss. Let's see if she gives me a kiss on my nose. So Sassy really loves me. And, I just wanted to say as one of my very last notes, when I was talking earlier about pets and knowing which pets to have, there are some pets that have been domesticated that are really safe for us to keep, like dogs and cats and rabbits and rats. Rats make wonderful pets. And I just want to say, if you think about getting a pet in the future, just ask yourself the question, where does it come from? Is it a wild animal? If it is, you have to say no, because having a wild animal as a pet is not a good idea because it's bad for the environment. But you can have a wonderful pet like Sassy that will love you and you can love her back and it doesn't harm the environment. Okay. Oh, she's on my hat now. Okay.